So back to the matter in hand, goalkeepers. I know what you're saying. What you're saying makes sense. But and there's a but here. I like to try and have two goalkeepers who inherently will play more often than not, week in and week out, and almost just in terms of a set and forget pairing. What I don't want is for maybe somewhere down the line to have to use a transfer on maybe bringing in a keeper just because I've got a bench warmer in there. Now, this season, maybe more than any other at this point, it's maybe just a little bit easier to have additional funds tied up on your bench, whether it be your goalkeeper or otherwise, because when you look at some of those high-end premium assets, those players that inherently you would go for at the start of the season, they just aren't delivering, really. And for me, you can look down maybe to that second tier of players, and there are a lot to choose from. You can look at the likes of maybe the Sterlings and the De Bruynes and Aubameyangs, for example, all players who, over the course of the season, you would expect to produce. But at this point in time, when you're looking at players who are in and around that 11 to 12 million, pound mark, then it's hard to justify that kind of outlay. So then if you're looking at maybe bringing in, the 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑡s of this world at maybe 8 million, then that sort of frees up a little bit of space, particularly during the present climate when there's so much uncertainty going around with whether it be COVID or injury. I just like to have that little bit of a safety blanket, that little warm, snuggly feeling, Jay. So if I was to change out a goalkeeper, which I'm happy to get rid of either, really, but it would have to be somebody who is involved, who more often than not was certainly looking to be start in their respective teams.
I've got two ideas for you then. The first could be to own two 4.5s, and then you've got a 0.5 to invest in your team. So maybe keep Martinez because his price has gone up, and then you could get Alex McCarthy, starts week in, week out. Or you could go the method of McCarthy and Foster, or a team like that where go on then.
Don't forget, and this is me key rule, my main stipulation. When we're talking about McCarthy, who I don't like, by the way, but I see his appeal. We're talking about template, and we're talking about high ownership. So there's a caveat to that. So I'm not making things easy for you here, Jay. I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that you're earning your corn tonight.
It's just like an idea to maybe pick a 4.0, a 4.5. So you could even go with, I don't know, maybe a Meslier. I think realistically he won't keep many clean sheets, but at least he'll start. And I think he's the better of the 4.5s kind of left in that group. So those are like the two options there. Then if you want two starting keepers, maybe go, Meslier is only owned by 4.1%. Nice and maverick for you. And he's liked by, one of the best managers around. And I think, I like the tactic, I get your logic, and it makes sense at the moment because of the high risk to injuries and a lot of problems that there are. Maybe I'm leaving myself too open because I've got McCarthy and Button, and obviously Button will probably never start because Ryan's kind of, nailed down that Brighton spot. But just for me, it would make a little bit more sense just to put that money elsewhere. And, you're saying that McCarthy's 2 template, but Martinez is owned by the most people in the game, 27%. So if anything, McCarthy would be less template than Martinez.
Yeah, but what we need to understand, and And this is how it's muddying the waters, because I was sitting on a template team, I think, of about 24% a few weeks back. It's steadily rising, which is scary. But consider I had Martinez when he was reserve at Arsenal. I had Harry Kane when absolutely nobody fancied him at the beginning of the season. Now steadily, like you say, Martinez is now the highest owned goalkeeper. He was probably maybe 1 or 2% at the start of the season. Harry Kane was around, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7% he was for him, which was ridiculous. So they're pulling me template, percentage up because everybody's jumping on board. Me, obviously, I'm just the flag bearer for FPL, because what I do, people will follow.
And we've seen it so far. Everybody's followed you. Your kind of Kane pick, Rashford. A lot of people have moved to Rashford this week. You've been setting the waves, and other people have been surfing on it. So I get you. You want to continue your maverick trend-setting ways. So maybe just go with, like I said, maybe go with Martinez and Meslier, because I don't think people in their right mind would pick Meslier, but this is a maverick choice, and kind of, I don't know if they've got a good run of fixtures because their defense is not very good, but it gives you that coverage which you're talking about and may give you a bit of maneuverability. I'm just thinking about funds, because there's some good, interesting, fun kind of debates that we've got kind of going in.
I'll tell you what, look, when we get down to the crux of the matter and we start talking about, right, well, actually, this isn't a really appealing asset to bring in. Let's look at who that I could be considering getting rid of, see what type of budget, this 0.5 million that I could potentially save with a goalkeeper, may or may not be relevant at all, because the big one for me, or the obvious player to offload, would be Aubameyang. He was at 11.8, I think, last time I seen. Now, the chances are, given, what we've talked about, his replacement, if it was a 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑒𝑑, I don't know, you're saving well over 3 million there anyway. So, it could, like I say, I'm open to everything. I will rule out nothing. But you know what? I've done the eye test on Meslier, and I think he's absolute garbage, by the way. On the I mean, he looks like his confidence is shot a little bit. We've seen Leeds play on a few nights. We've actually commentated, and on both occasions, Meslier just didn't instill me with. I couldn't have any faith in the goalkeeper. So, on the eye test alone, and coupled with the fact that Leeds have been shipping goals left, right, and centre, I'm not really sold. I'm not sold on that one either.
He's up there with Matt Ryan as the worst in terms of XG prevented. It's just kind of, I'm trying to facilitate your ability to get a little bit more money into your side. But maybe that's not where we're going to do it. And like you said as well, it's a very fair point that possibly we might not even need to do it. Now, before we jump into the defender options here, because this is where the fun begins, the blind date. Stel has asked a couple of questions here, your friend. Anand has said, sorry for joining late. We've not really got into it yet, so don't worry. And also the positive thing is you can rewatch the intro on here on Hot Mic, but also we will be putting this on YouTube as well. So, don't worry too much. So Stel has said, I had 4 players doubtful for the weekend, had to take out Trent and Vinagre, who I kept forgetting to remove, brought in Walker and Reguilón. I think those are 2 really good kind of picks. Reguilón has been a really fantastic creator for Tottenham. The only problem is obviously the kind of run of games, but Ben, you've often said that that fixtures don't matter to you too much, especially in this weird season, and Tottenham are an informed team. Walker, for me, is always a pretty good and also undervalued FPL asset. I don't think he's ever really picked by a lot of teams, even though he's one of the almost nailed people that Pep rarely rotates. He is Mr. Consistent. and that they've never really needed to look at a replacement right back because Walker has always been in there. And also Stell has said Leno and Martinez are guaranteed starters, so I guess it's down to which line is better. I believe firmly that Villa have got it more sorted at the moment. I think Arsenal have got a big problem, especially with creativity. I think at the back, they flattered to deceive. You know, they've kept a clean sheet here and there. They've had a few good kind of results against big teams. The wins, you know, they have done well, but with negative football. And realistically, I think that Arsenal will struggle. They might not let in a huge amount of goals, but I see that they'll struggle over the next few weeks. You know, it's going to be a tough time. I don't like
as an Arsenal supporter, would you not expect some kind of reaction following that defeat to Villa? Was that game week 8, the 3-0 defeat?
Yeah. I think the thing about the players is where can they get an extra bit from? That was where I was looking at the team. I was looking at who's going to be the creators, what can we do better, differently at the back, and it's kind of, you know, the definition of insanity. They're just doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different thing to happen. And this is something that happened when you and I were watching together, Ben. You got more frustrated than me because I've been used to it for the past couple of seasons where we just do the same kind of drab football. And you were shouting at the screen. You know, that's the fun thing about our kind of live commentaries is we do get a little bit wound up, especially about our assets. But for me, there's no kind of clear alternative. Like if I could say, right, we'll bang in Ozil or we'll switch up the play, but this is our best 11. This is kind of the best team. For some reason, Arteta's kind of fixated of playing Aubameyang out the left. He did it all last season. He's continuing it this season, and he's not taking off either Lacazette, Willian, or putting Pepe on, who's looked bright in certain stretches. We might be able to do a little bit better, but I can't see how we can improve because there's a big gaping hole of creativity in the team. And I think it's a personnel rather than systemic problem as well. I don't know about that, Ben.
Look, I've been hugely disappointed with Arsenal. Aubameyang owner from week 1, he's very much overstayed his welcome. I've had fires to put out elsewhere, which is probably why he's managed a stay of execution. And then after the result at Old Trafford, you know what? I really thought that was it. That was a starting point. Villa were coming off the back of 2 indifferent performances, conceding lots of goals. And I went Leno over Martinez for that game, thinking over on the score sheet at the Emirates, also clean sheet. They'll back up that win at Man United, and then to produce, you know, that kind of performance where Arteta out. I was absolutely raging. And this is that thing about exactly what we're going to do with our wild card tonight. If you anonymised Aubameyang and you just purely looked at it from the data, there is absolutely no way in a million years he would be anywhere near my team. And yet, there's part of me in the back of my mind still thinking, do you know what? Well, Arteta's going to have them fired up. He's been training hard down at Conley, you know, the last week. He might just be worth another shout. And, I mean, it's ludicrous to be thinking of that. That's insanity.
This is the problem, you know, you kind of convince yourself in these situations that, oh, yes, this player's going to turn good. And this is the problem that I have with Sterling. The only reason why he's staying in my team is the turn of kind of quality in the fixtures for Manchester City. But even them as a team, you know, haven't kind of really justified them. And speaking about the Aubameyang data, he's had 2 goals so far this season, but he's only had 6 shots inside the box across the 6 game weeks, amounting an XGI of 2.58. It's pretty dreadful stuff from him, you know, and that is with inflated kind of data by the penalties, you know, that he's going to be involved in. You know, Fornals, even Sterling, Bowen, Tielemans, Jorginho have better XGI than Aubameyang. He shouldn't be in kind of consideration at all. There's, even with the fixtures, you can't even say that Arsenal got good fixtures coming up, because they've got Leeds next, who are obviously a leaky defence, but then Arsenal could be, you know, a problem with this side. Wolves, Tottenham, Burnley, Southampton and Everton are all games that I think Arsenal will struggle in, defensively and attacking wise. I think these teams can cause Arsenal problems. So, you know, it's a big worry for me. And the most overall points for Arsenal this season of all their FPL players is Hector Bellerin. Not even a striker, not even a midfielder. It's Hector Bellerin, who might be a good choice, who might be one of the maverick ones that I put in here. So let's dive into player 1 and 2 in terms of this blind date in defence. Now, one of the suggestions I made was Mitchell out, but maybe you can compare the other players in your back line that you might want out. And we will answer people's questions in a second as well, but I'm going to evaluate this first one and put it to Ben. So I've actually put 2 players in here, because one is premium and one is budget, but they're both from the same team. And these 2 players are in a side that have had a very difficult start to the season and yet have put out formidable defensive data. 3 clean sheets so far, 7th best big chances conceded data for the season. On top of this, the team have only allowed 46 shots in the box, which is 4th best for the season. And this is after playing Liverpool, City and Leicester in their opening 8 fixtures. Now, the more expensive option of these 2 has some fascinating data, especially because he's on set pieces. 17 chances created for the season, which is the most among defenders, and the 2nd highest XA of all defenders. But on top of this, the defender, as I said, has the dead ball duties and a formidable 1.37 XGI. So this sounds quite a good little player here with some good data. Now, the cheaper option of the 2, who's 0.5 million cheaper, or 0.5, I don't think they call it million now, do they? The cheaper option of the 2 has a slightly higher XGI for the season with 1.47, but isn't on dead balls. And they have the 4th best XA for the season amongst defenders. A lot of crosses into the box, quite a few chances created. They're looking good. Now, what do you think about, on the surface, the data from these 2 teams? And do ask any more questions. You know, fixtures are looking good for these 2 as well. So ask away.
Did you say that both of these players were from the same side?
Yes, so that's why I've coupled them together, because it's kind of a premium and a cheaper option. The premium one is 5.1 mil at the moment, and the cheaper one is 4.5 mil.
Because my first instinct when you were talking about that, and I got me first, it's Burnley, and then I got thrown off along the way, and then I was trying to recall who Burnley had actually played. I know in terms of giving chances up and big chances created against them, that they were particularly well. But then I was thinking about, well, actually, who within that back line is actually creating it? And there's maybe Charlie Taylor. I mean, on the opposite flank, you've had Phil Bawsey, who struggled with injury. You've had Eric Peters, who struggled with injury. And you've just had, is it Matt Loughton, who's just come back, and Ben Mee. So there's not. So that would just mean Taylor and 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑠. So I don't think it's Burnley in that respect.
So what do you think about the data?
I love the data.
I mean,
absolutely, right up my street. If I'm looking for defenders within my team, primarily I want offensive returns, and then or the possibility of at least, you know, trying to create something in that final third, and then hopefully with the added bonus of maybe a defensive clean sheet somewhere down the line. So now, I do love, in fact, both of those picks. Tick boxes for me, definitely. So
So you like them a lot, and I think I should reveal them to you so that you can kind of further analyze them. But one of the people has actually said this. William has got one of them. FPL Dave has
Big
also
Dave's in the
mentioned
house,
them.
is he? Hold on.
FPL Dave. So yeah, welcome to Dave. He's mentioned the first one, the premium one, is Aaron Cresswell. 5.1 in terms of price, 8.4% selection. Pretty kind of maverick in terms of your choice there, Ben. On the border of saying differential. And the other one that I put in there, somebody had a guess that was Kufal. Not quite, but of course it is Masuaku. Now, he's somebody that I put my money where my mouth is. He is in my side, but he is even more of a maverick choice for you. 1.8% selection. Now, I think your eyes light up just as much from the fact that they're so low owned in terms of it. Knowing what team that they come from now, and I know historically this season you've been a little bit apprehensive on it, and you were glowing there. You were looking at that data, you're saying that was a really good kind of player there. Knowing who they are now, what do you think? Do you like the choice still?
FPL Dave will be in total agreement with me here. So for those who don't know, I do a fantasy weekly podcast with Dave, and also co-host of that show is a guy called James Copeland. Now, James Copeland is a big advocate for all things crap, being 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑒𝑑, and Masuaku is another one of his picks. So when you mentioned Masuaku, and I just see James's big hair, and I'm just thinking, oh, he looks like Marge Simpson. And can I really be putting somebody like that in my team? And I still have in my own head, is he guaranteed the minutes? I'm not convinced of Moyes. I'm not convinced of West Ham. But you know what? Given what you've said and given the data points, taking all of that out, they tick a lot of boxes for me then. Yeah.
So a bit of a mind blow there. We kind of almost convinced.
Honestly, that's me. That's me done. I'm absolutely shagged out. Yeah.
Your brain is just is gone. I've messed with it too much already. So that was my kind of first pick here, and a lot of people kind of like it, and we'll just quickly go through what a lot of people have said there. Now, FPL Dave has said, sorry, I'm late. You haven't missed the wild card yet. We're just beginning. William has said, Cancelo, Cresswell, Chilwell, the big three going forward. Well, we're going to talk about more of the defensive assets, but I like all three of those. William has also said Salah to Mane -4 for 3 to 4 week punt. I'm always kind of against what I call a short-term punt, but I did do it with Heung-min Son. But the whole point with Son was he was supposed to be longer term, but I may be doing it in a punt in the essence that I might get Mount soon, purely because I like a few other assets around his price point. And Tottenham, their data over the last few weeks, that they've kind of regressed a little bit in attack. Kane is still fine to own. I think he's going to be great to own, possibly for the whole season. But Son, the Tottenham attack has lost a little bit of its tooth, its bite so far this last 4 game weeks, I would say, since the last international break. So that's one thing. And then Anand has said, since you're talking about defenders, would pull defenders out, what do you think the highest overall rank points for a defender will be this season? Oh my gosh, that is a difficult question and prediction for top 5 defenders points. I think that's a little bit out of scope purely because we've seen, TAA, who's somebody who hasn't really had injuries before, been so consistent. And then because of this kind of weird start to the season, it's going to be hard to predict. I think players from Manchester City will do well because they're one of the best teams in the league. I think it's going to be difficult. Maybe Chilwell will be up there as a Chelsea defender if they can keep this good form at the back. And I don't know. It's really hard because I want to say the Liverpool, premium assets. They just jump out at me. But then you're right. there's a lot of players out of that side. There's a lot of instability, and I think that's really going to damage the team psychologically as well. So I'm going to stick with maybe 𝐷𝑖𝑠, Walker, and some of the other players from the Man City back line. Chilwell is strong. Maybe Reguilón as well. I'll throw him in there as like a top point scorer. So yeah, Ben, what do you think about a top point scorer before we get into our next very fun Maverick out of the blind date pick for your next defender?
Difficult. I think we need to be maybe looking outside or away from those teams who are involved in European competition. I just feel as if the side who have the opportunity to rest adequately, and work on their game between fixtures will benefit from that, particularly, as we head further, down the line into the season. Your December's, January, February, it's going to be heavily congested. There's going to be, at the moment, it's about managing load for players, and we're still, the Uniteds, the Cities, even the Chelseas to an extent, all came in on the back of a heavily disrupted or no pre-season whatsoever, and in terms of the research, the evidence is there to say that, the more sessions you have under the belt, the less likely you are of picking up an injury, and vice versa. So we know that injuries are coming. The injury to Trent came as no real surprise. The issue with Robertson comes as no real surprise. We've seen issues with the likes of Laporte, John Stones, Mendy, Cancelo, all of those, Nathan Ake now at Manchester City, their concerns, they're playing 2, maybe 3 games over an 8-day period. Could it be, something slightly? I mean, I do like Chilwell. I'm a big fan of Chilwell, particularly how he started his career down at Stamford Bridge. Is there going to be just a surprise thrown in there, the mix? I mean, look at Digne. He might be one that, if he keeps on producing those attack and returns, and Ancelotti can get Everton ticking over, again how they started the season, then I don't see why he, won't be far away. And then you look at maybe the likes of Southampton. It's certainly not out of the realms of possibility. All you need to do, you're stringing. If you can string 30 to 32 good starts, Premier League starts across the season in a half decent side, you're not going to be far away, because there won't be many players who are playing more games than that across the course of the season this year. I very much doubt. Yeah.
And And has actually brought up an interesting point, which you said in the earlier podcast, 8 days ago, when the game week kind of finished. Wolves might benefit from this, because you had a bit of a theory, which I think makes logical sense. I'm not too kind of keen on Wolves' defensive assets, but they've got 4 clean sheets so far this season. So maybe I'm overlooking them just a little bit. But I worry about their historical inability to kind of be consistent at the back. I think Patricio's not a very good goalkeeper. And especially this season with a loss of kind of quite a few important assets, 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑡 on the left, they've got a lot of problems because they don't really know who's going to be starting there each kind of week in, week out. But Wolves might benefit because they seem to be a team who really kind of manage well their injuries, don't they, Ben? They have one of the least kind of shufflings of their team historically. So is that kind of going to come into your thinking as well? Maybe not now, but post-Christmas, because they've got no European kind of involvement, and they have been a top, 7-8 side over the past couple of seasons.
Wolves are one of those teams that a lot of people were talking about ahead of the new campaign. No distractions with European football. The sole focus was on the Premier League. Then they lost 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑑. And I think that's a big blow. And I think that was a conscious decision by Nuno. He really set out his stall to to maybe adopt a more conservative, passive approach to his games. We've seen, Adama Traore fall from grace, really, from a player who was being touted around Europe at 50, 60, 70 million to a player who, I think, 3 Premier League starts in none since probably the back end of maybe September time-ish. And he's way down the pecking order now, well behind Neto. And, that might be a decision from Nuno to say, well, our time will come. There will be better opportunities down the line. Whether Traore is still struggling with that ongoing shoulder problem, nobody's 100% sure outside of Molineux. The backroom staff will be having the conversations. Does he need surgery? He may well do. But for now, like I say, it's certainly not the same Wolves team that we've been used to since their promotion from the Championship. They don't seem as dynamic. They're not breaking through the lines. They're not transitioning as quick. They're more happy to do, play a more possession-based football. And I have been critical of Wolves, but that's probably more of an emotive response in the fact that I'm just disappointed because I'm not as enthused or excited by watching Wolves anymore. I've seen them a couple of times, and to be honest, they were pretty boring, and I did not enjoy the game whatsoever. So, my feelings towards them were based around the heart, certainly not with the head. And then in terms of, the league form and what they're producing, it's hard to argue really with their league position.
Yeah, it's a problem with Wolves, and I think so far this season as well, the last couple of seasons, I think 2018-19, they had the least kind of big chances conceded. Now they're about mid-table for it. I think there's a few problems at the back there. Maybe will be sorted as players kind of integrate into the squad. But let's move on to this next fun Maverick pick with, your back line here. And this is a player who I will just get up their actual ownership. So again, this is a hugely Maverick one, maybe the most Maverick differential one that I put to you so far. 2.2% ownership.
Tick.
So already, I think you like that. That's a big tick there. Now, this player is part of a team that seems over the last few game weeks to have got their defense more organized. Recently, over the last 4 game weeks, they've actually had the second lowest XG conceded, whereas over the course of the season, they've been a little bit leaky. Over the last 4, third lowest shots in the box conceded and third lowest goal attempts conceded. But what I love about this defender is their amazing individual data. Now, bearing in mind that they've only played since game week 5, they've created 11 chances in their last 4 matches, 1 assist, valued at 5.4. And over the course of the season, again, only playing since game week 5, they've got the 4th best XA. So I think this is quite an incredible player bubbling under the surface. I'm definitely considering them. And looking at the team kind of data, very promising. And then looking at the team's fixtures, they're one of the top teams, I'd say 5th best in terms of fixtures upcoming. What do you like about that data there, Ben? Or do you like that data? It might not be appealing enough to you.
I love the data. Am I supposed to say any of these that I don't like? No, I love that. I love players who are maybe just, like I say, bubbling underneath the surface, just underneath the radar, because that's the trick to this game, isn't it? Anybody can pick a player that's in form, that's producing the points. The difficulty, and it requires a degree of luck, is to get those players, just before the masses catch on, before they become template. So, we're looking at a player who is ticking a lot of boxes with regards to his ownership. I mean, a 5.4, that's up there for me in terms of, value for players within the back line. So it may be that they may need to be compromised elsewhere And that could potentially go back to the conversation we had with regards to the backup goalkeeper and maybe freeing up some funds that way. But like I say, for my safety net at the moment is always going to be Aubameyang, because I don't see anybody coming up tonight who's going to be in and around his price point. And I should be able to at least have 3 million, I would think, somewhere along the lines, to play with and maybe invest and strengthen elsewhere. But at 5.4, from what you're saying and his ownership, I like it. I like it a lot. I mean, I'm what we've discussed. I'm liking the Cresswell, the Masuaku, not so much. And I don't want to decimate my backline, because I still like Chilwell, and I still like Diaz, and I still like Bertrand. So there's possibly, there's 2 places up for grabs there. And, we could look at Cresswell in this £5.4 million, future star of Ben's, one-eyed king team. I mean, tell me who it is.
So I'm going to put the chat out of their misery, because some people have been guessing. Anand said 𝐿𝑝, but also Cancelo. William said Cancelo, and also Anand said Tierney. Well, I can confirm that it is the teammate of one of your players.
Oh, Bellerin.
It is the teammate of Diaz. No, it's João Cancelo. And I think now, the fact that I've mentioned him now, this might bring a bit of evaluation, because obviously good fixtures, great data, but there is the Pep roulette kind of with him individually. Last season, he wasn't selected too much, but he's been nailed since game week 5. What are your thoughts and feelings now with Cancelo? Amazing data there, but historically, he's been in and out of the Man City side. There's a bit of competition there also with Mendy and Zinchenko. Does that make you a little bit more apprehensive, just purely on that kind of selection pick there, as somebody who will be in your 11 week in, week out?
So that does change things slightly. Benjamin Mendy is in training, so we know he's not far away from a return. Cancelo has been on my radar. Particularly, we've actually seen him playing what we perceive to be out of position, almost in an inside left role on occasions for Manchester City, when they went with a flat back 3. And then he's played a little bit more of a, left side holding midfielder, as it were. And yes, I really do like him. Given his problems in terms of the injuries that he's picked up, and with Benjamin Mendy, coming back to challenge him, I would like to think, that Pep rotates around European competition, and it's Cancelo that gets a nod in the Premier League, and Mendy in in Europe. But you just can't, there's just no guarantees with that. It's all about the Champions League for City. We all know it really is, and until you win that. And Cancelo arguably is a much better player than Mendy. For me, that City backline, we're talking about Ruben Diaz and probably Kyle Walker are the 2 that you could nail your colours to week in, week out, other than the goalkeeper Ederson. And then the rest, you're at risk there. And a 5.4 for a player who isn't locked in. Yeah, that is
a difficult one.
That is
Why I put it in there, because I think he's a hard one to evaluate, and it will give you something to maybe munch over until the kind of game week deadline. But the one last statistic that I want to put to you, 61% of Cancelo's touches have been in the opponent's half. He is definitely out of position. He's definitely playing as kind of a wide creative player, and he's looking good. So to everybody listening, great kind of knowing your footballers there and picking him out. And Anand is talking about he can be a great pick. He returned 11 points for Anand in game week 38 plus. I mean, what a haul that is. And William, you're right. He could have bagged 15 points against Liverpool. He's due a haul. I'm really considering him, but also I've got all these reservations that you share as well, Ben. So I think, you know, it's a big call. It is a big call. Now I'm going to move to one of my other picks here, a very maverick one, and I think I'm not sure if you'll like this one. You might find it interesting. I think people listening might find it interesting as well that I picked this player with a 3.2% ownership. So it ticks that box there of very low ownership there. But this player has 9 shots in the box so far this season. They are a centre-back, and that is the most among all defenders, which I find astonishing. But what interests me is the fact that, again, a bit similar to Cancelo and Manchester City, the team last season had one of the best defences, but they've been a little bit leaky this year. I'd say that they were elite or near elite. And now in terms of XG conceded this year, they've let themselves a little bit down. But last year they were competing with the biggest and the best in the league. You know, they were definitely top 5, top 4, maybe even competing with City and Liverpool for one of the best defences. But I think the team's bought well in terms of defensive coverage, a good new defender to kind of be in this back line with this player. And over the last few games, I've seen a notable improvement in the data, and they've been really able to limit their opponent's chances. There's only been 1 clean sheet in this period, which is fair enough, but the underlying data is good, with only 2 big chances conceded, the best in the league, 15 shots in the box conceded, the second best in the league, and the lowest XG conceded over the last 4 games. And I do believe that this team has the capacity to be elite at the back. Their attack seems to be finding its feet at the moment, which I think is working in tandem with one another. But, you know, it's a very maverick move based on that data. Over the last 4, it looks good. Over the last 8, questionable. But then last season, they were really a quality side. So mix that in with probably the second best in terms of fixture difficulty rating over the next 6. So people, I think Anand said he was a bit confused because I said 5th best fixture difficulty rating. I should have said over next 6 games. I look, you know, medium to longer term in terms of these teams. But what do you think about the data and fixtures of this player individually?
I must admit I'm not as enthused as I was with the 3 players that preceded him. I like when you mention maverick and low ownership and potential. It piqued me interest with that. Maybe fixture. This is a tough call. What price? I mean, this one might come down to price. And of course, I'm looking at 2 slots, I think, realistically in that back line. So I'm almost sold on Cancelo. I think he's there, and I'm pretty much buying into Cresswell. So what you need to consider is to shift 1 or 2 of those, you know, one of those out of that back line needs to be pretty impressive. And this one might go from just the numbers to the heart and being swayed that one. So that this is a tough one. It'll have to be, there might have to be some feeling towards drafting him in on this.
So Anand has said Castagne once fit. I can confirm it is not Castagne.
I was thinking,
it's not a Leicester player. He's a former Leicester player. It's Harry Maguire, 5.4. Now, the reason why I put him in is just for that reason. You know, last season, Manchester United were an elite defence. And I think 𝐿𝑜𝑣𝑒𝑑 is going to make such a difference there. I think their poor start of the season is partly down to a lack of pre-season. And we've seen it, you know, with other teams. The last few game weeks, you know, yes, they lost to Arsenal. but they had a really good result against Chelsea. 0-0 against Chelsea was a good one. And that 3-1 away at Everton maybe kind of shows that they've turned it around, because they went behind and it was difficult. And even the Newcastle result was pretty good, which is the game where he scored. So it's an interesting one. What are your thoughts and feelings now that you know that it's Maguire, based on the data, but also maybe your heart? Because I think this one is a much more difficult one, especially because the data this season isn't onside, but then historical data is from last season.
We've seen an upturn in performances in recent game weeks. He went through that little bit of a dodgy spell, prior to the last international break. And then was he dismissed for England? And it all seemed to be going out of control. Did he or did he not pick up a slight injury? There was a feeling that Ollie would take him out the firing line. He didn't. He's bounced back. Showed some good character. When you think of Manchester United, I think attacking assets is where I would predominantly be looking. The Brunos, the Rashfords, of course, during Project Restart, the Martials. United have found it really difficult. I'm glad to see Luke Shaw out of that, back line, first of all, and I'm glad to see the least ever. So he's not coming anywhere near my team. And I'm also glad to see Pogba out the team. And as much as I don't necessarily rate McTominay and Fred, I think in terms of the structure and the way Ollie likes to set up and play his team, and that gives the likes of the Brunos and that license to maybe just focus on their attacking style of play. I can warm to Maguire. I can see the appeal there. We've got Eric Bailey, who's out, Lindelof, who is carrying an ongoing back issue. So in terms of being locked in for minutes, Harry Maguire's there. Look, that isn't a bad pick, if the truth be known. What price is he coming in at, Harry? Did you see it?
So he's 5.4 as well. So in terms of it, Cancelo probably, if it was my choice, Cancelo edges it for me if it was the choice between the two, because he's in the more informed defense. But there's just that element, that maverick bit that I think you like as well, that could really shine because such low ownership. And William there said Maguire to Diaz enables a City triple up elsewhere. People love the City triples up, and it could be a good time to own City across the board because they've got a good run of fixtures coming up. Now, I'm going to give you my final Maverick picks for defence here. And this is another couple of defenders, two centre-backs here. I'm sorry if it's a bit boring that they're centre-backs, but I think they've got a good ability. This team here, I can say that the manager at his previous club went to a club that kind of really did well with set pieces. It's a club that kind of knows the value of these kind of interactions and capitalizing on these moments. And this is one of the reasons why they did quite well in Project Restart. These two players are also part of one of the informed teams this season. As I said, they're centre-backs. So where they're getting their XG and kind of goal involvements is from dead ball situations. And I think that they're both there or thereabouts with the dead ball situations. I think they're both kind of targets here. But one is slightly more expensive than the other. And the one that is slightly more expensive also has the slightly higher XGI. But what attracts me most is they have the best run over the next 6 games in terms of the league. They're top of that fixture kind of list. The side, speaking for itself, great defensive data, both nicely priced. So one is less than 5 mil and one is less than 5.5. So they're kind of well priced as well. And looking at it, these are teams that this is a team that has improved, that is going to be kind of buoyant, feeling good at the moment. And in terms of XG conceded for the season, they're up there in the top 5, not letting a lot of big chances to opponents. You know, they've only let 11, so they're top 5 there as well. And then attempts in the box, again, they're one of the top performers. It's kind of positive there in terms of these teams. So coupling with that is they've had quite a few difficult starting fixtures, one of which was against Liverpool. So what do you think about these two centre-backs here? Maybe you've got a clue who they are.
Mings. I'm sure I'm positive it's Aston Villa. I'm positive it is. Yeah.
You got me on this one. Yeah.
Yeah,
and Konsa, Ezri Konsa.
Do you know what? When we're talking about the non-template model, and the reason I'm sort of moving away from Cresswell, even now that you've mentioned Harry Maguire, a lot of people are jumping on Villa for the right reasons. It makes a lot of sense. They tick a lot of boxes. But just given the type of manager that I am, of everything that you've outlined, I think Cancelo and Maguire would be the two. As much, like I said, there's a lot to like about Villa, particularly, like you say, their form's been great from the beginning of Project Restart. Maybe Konsa would be out of the two. I'm presuming his ownership is
7.6%.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised at that. What Mings is got to be double figures, is he? Quite.
Yeah, let me just get Mings up for you because I don't put him up. So at 5.3, he's 12% owned, which is still fairly low.
You know what? I'm still not totally convinced with Aston Villa. I'm not as convinced as, say, I am with maybe Southampton. I think, you know, there's still a lot of emphasis there on your Jack Grealishes of this world. You know, Ross Barkley has come in and hit the ground running. Yeah, his bubble might burst, you know, somewhere. John McGinn, you know, he's probably, you know, he's playing like a player who's come off the back of a long-term injury and he's enjoying his football. If Villa were to maybe pick up 1 or 2 injuries, I actually ran some data on Aston Villa this season, and we were looking at the number of substitutions made during play and the number of changes made by managers from Premier League game week to game week. And this was all about this 5 substitution rule that I was looking at inherently. And one of the big proponents or advocates for this 5 substitution rule is Pep Guardiola. Well, that's all well and good, Pep. However, do you know there's only 2 teams in this league who've actually had fewer amount of substitutes than your good self, and that's Aston Villa and Burnley. I think City have had 14. I think Villa might have had 13 and Burnley 12, or vice versa with Burnley and Sean Dyche had huge injury problems. So, you know, that can be, and a threadbare squad. So then he can be sort of, you know, forgiven for that almost. But with Villa, you know, they've more or less stuck with the same squad and starting 11 on so many occasions. I just think you maybe see picking up 1 or 2 injuries and that little house of cards could come tumbling down quite quickly. I may be wrong. You know, there's always going to be elements of luck in and around football, and keeping that centre back or that back line or that back 5 with Martinez in there, you know, fit would be paramount to their success. And even the likes of maybe Douglas Luiz and John McGinn. Look, I know what you're saying. I think it's Cancelo and Maguire defensively. I like the numbers, and I like the ownership, and I like that, like you say, that maverick bubbling underneath the surface, the potential there to. I think for me, Villa and maybe West Ham to an extent have got a ceiling, and we're not too far off that realistically for me. With Maguire and what have you, there's got the potential there to really just click into gear and produce some really good numbers over the coming game weeks.
Yeah, no, I think I hear all the kind of things that you say. I'm still quite hot on Aston Villa assets because I just think that they found a good recipe, and until one of those problems happens, I'm happy to own the assets because I've got a wild card. If things go terrible for them and there's all these problems, but until that happens, I think that they're a pretty formidable side and somebody to be looking at. Now I'm going to move it on to the midfield here, and just in terms of it, my suggestions with your team is obviously over out and maybe a premium asset in like Salah or De Bruyne. But I know that you're very reticent to do that. You're not too worried about, keeping with the flow on that. So, those would be my kind of picks for over out, De Bruyne or Salah in. But I'm going to give you some other choices here. And I'd also say that Tielemans, I'm not too keen on, just purely because I think that he's a midfielder. He assists the assister. He's not kind of too involved in attacks. But you picked him because, again, he's quite a maverick one. I think for his price point, there are other people. And this is where I'm going to be offering a person around his price point, 4.2% ownership. But in the last 4 games, 15 chances created, 2 big chances, 1 assist. This is good stuff. And he certainly settled into the side. So he was a little bit late in. That's why I'm focusing on like the last 4 game weeks, because he came to the side a little bit late in terms of the transfer window. The team that he plays for is one of only 3 sides to rack up more than 10 big chances in their last 4 games. And overall, they have the 3rd most big chances of the season and the 2nd most chances in total, this team that he's a midfielder for. 6 mil price point, kind of quite involved with the attacks here. And there's quite a few players in the attack of this side that are doing quite well as well. So he's going to be assisting or having his own kind of chances here in a good setup, I would say, a really kind of good attacking side. So on the surface of it, what do you think about those initial numbers, especially that 15 chances created in 4 games? I mean, that's pretty ridiculous kind of numbers.
Like it a hell of a lot. I'm looking at the current midfield, and I know what you're saying. I'm hot. Rashford's me set and forget captain. So he's staying.
I wouldn't even dare to question Rashford. I know.
Ward-Prowse has been there since the beginning of Project Restart. I have a lot of emotional baggage linked in with him, and Tielemans, just because I've brought him in. So I've got 2, possibly 3. I mean, even Souček, who scored last time out. But I'd be willing to sacrifice him. So we've got Souček and Oba and possibly Tielemans. And I do like what you're saying. I mean, it's the attacking returns that I'll go for, and I'll sacrifice, everything else really to have the entertainers on board. And at that,
I think you're going to be interested to know who it is, though.
I've got not at that price point. I mean, I've got a feeling you're going to throw Zaha in somewhere. I'm sure you are. And 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑡 has got to be in and around this. Who is this? I mean, I've got literally no idea. You've lost me. Put me out of my misery.
So it's a Mr. Mustafa Barkley. I like to call him.
Man, really?
I knew this one would absolutely wreck you because you've kind of waxed lyrical there from looking at that initial. But maybe this is the one that I've done you dirtiest on, because the data's there, but I know you're not that keen on Aston Villa, but then they've got so many assets that are producing this good data.
Really got it going for Ross Barkley is he's obviously come to Villa to prove a point. He feels in his own mind that he still has a chance of going to the Euros, rightly or wrongly, and the only chance that he's got of doing that is if he's playing 90 minutes week in and week out. And that's, on the premise that he arrived at Villa Park. We've seen that, when Dean Smith basically threw him straight into the side, having just arrived on loan from Chelsea. So he's going to get the minutes. You've got Jack Grealish as well, who's in the form of his life, who seems to be getting better and better. For me, there's still maybe question marks with regards to, and this player might appear further down the line. Ollie Watkins, I'm not 100% sold on him. Look at Barkley. That's a curveball. Fucking hell, that's a bad one. But you know what? I like it. This is what this whole Wildcard anonymised little whatever we call it, this test bed, or this was the premise of it, was all about this, was giving me players or giving other people players that you would never consider because of whatever external influence and factor, players that you would overlooked. So I think in that respect, you've done an excellent job in
and low ownership as well. I mean, because nobody is looking at Rostafer himself, it's a difficult one for people to kind of see. People are looking at, as you mentioned there, Watkins, Grealish, even actually he's lower owned in terms of it, John McGinn, but Target. If Williams says, I love this format, Maguire has thrown me. I mean, this was the point of it, to just, it's almost like a psychological experiment to show, these players might not do amazingly after saying this, but they do have good data to boot. They've got, I'm not picking them for differential sake. I genuinely like some of them. A few of them I've got in my side, like I said, with Masuaku, Cancelo, I'm really considering Barkley. I like the looks of. So, this one you're going to mull over. So we'll move into the next one, because I think this one, slightly higher ownership.
He's borderline, ownership. He's borderline.
He's borderline. Only 2 starts this season for this player. He was injured, and he's come back, but with fine form. In their last 2 matches, 2 double-digit hauls. I think you know who it is. 3 assists, 4 big chances in the last 4. I mean, there's some pretty damn good data here, and 8 chances in total created, 1.19 expected assists in the last 4, which is 3rd from top, only behind Zaha and Harrison for the season. I mean, over the last 4 game weeks. Anand has got it right. Ziyech, I think his ownership is going up by quite a bit. Maybe this one isn't as differential, but I think he's one of the lower owned assets in terms of Chelsea players. What do you think about Ziyech then, Ben? From that pretty promising data, but there's that kind of injury worry kind of over him. And also, will he be picked? There's 2 starts in there, but Lampard has been tinkering with that team.
From what
it's a
I've
little
seen,
bit of a worry there, isn't it?
You love him. Last time out, I think we touched upon it on the last podcast. What a wonderful left foot. I mean, his right foot isn't bad either, by the way. He caught the ball there, and I tell you what, the defender took it like a man, because I think I probably would have still been crying if that had hit me. The ball for Chilwell was ridiculous. I think he put one through for Werner, who he put it wide, so it could have been another assist. He was following a slow start where he had two wayward passing. He got his eyes in, and it was I just honestly I was blown away. For me, coming into the season, it was about Christian Pulisic, getting him fit, and he was my player. Once he was up to speed, he was the Chelsea go-to. I'm looking at it now and thinking, you know what? I think this guy can produce it on the biggest stage. With regards to his injury history, you know, it's not like it was a muscle problem. It's not like it's a Pulisic. You know, it was a knee injury. There was a strain there. I think it was a major ligament, if I recall, against Brighton in a pre-season friendly. It was pretty innocuous. So there's nothing there at this stage to, you know, warrant concerns with regards to his availability and this, and maybe Frank having to manage him as he is doing with Pulisic, because, you know, when we talk about soft tissue tears, hamstrings, groins, calves, you know that fatigue is going to be a major factor in those, which is why, you know, he's been a little bit careful with Pulisic. With 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑑, he came back from injury and he started him 3 games in a week. I was maybe a little bit surprised at that myself. And, you know, if that's how he's performing coming off the back of that, you know, medium-termish injury, then, yeah, I'm excited to see what he can produce. And I think, yeah, like with any team, if you're performing and you have the shirt, then, you know, I don't think there's any reason as to why managers need to be changing things unnecessarily.
Yeah, and for me, I would be picking him in the side. I think he's
that 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑑
fantastic.
Would temper my disdain for Barkley, because you could.
And also, he would be kind of a good asset to maybe bring out for bringing, to bring out and get that over money. You could then have quite a lot to put in your side there.
Given that, you could have Barkley over, you could have Souček, 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑑, and then you get rid of Mitchell, Lamptey, and you could bring in probably Cancelo and Maguire. I mean,
oof, that is a very, very untemplate team there. I don't think anybody would have that in terms of it. So I like 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑑. I think I'm going to give it maybe a week or 2 extra in terms of my mind, but Son to 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑑 is a big kind of transfer in my mind this week. Again, as we've said kind of throughout this, wait until maybe the last minute in terms of transfers, just because we don't know what's going to happen with the international break. Now, I've got one here, and there's a lot to love about this player. The second most chances created this season, 3 of them big. In terms of expected assists, 1.34 over the course of the season. But also, this midfielder has 3 goals, 2.24 xGI. I said 3 goals, didn't I? 2.24 xGI and a lot of shots, 15 so far. So it's quite an interesting one. But the problem with this one is they're quite well owned. So this one here is not that maverick. It's a 25% ownership. But looking at the data, really good fixtures coming up. Second best fixtures in terms of fixture difficulty rating. This is going to be a good one in terms for attack. Could be a lot of output here. What are you thinking about this player? Good data to boot. Quite impressive stuff. Involved in all the team's kind of attacks there, you know, from the amount of chances created. Would you consider
Do you know
this
when you
player?
talk about they talk about stats in football and they go, you know, we had 55 shots on target. We had 95% of the play. And the opposition manager goes, you know, the one stat that you need to consider, we're 1-1-0, putting the ball in the back of the net. The one stat out of everything that overrides just what you've said, it almost makes us just dismiss, is that ownership. Is the ownership, and I just go,
okay,
you know, that doesn't fit my own personal template model. And 25 is, if I had got him at 5% and he was 25, I'll keep him like I have done with Kane. But buying in at that level, it just seems to go against everything that I like to try and, you know, it's like me morals. I have me morals, me fantasy morals, me fantasy template morals. Would not allow me to buy somebody at 25% ownership. Although what?
Yeah, Anand has asked, is it Grealish? It is not Grealish, and I've tried to do you dirty here, Ben. I've tried to almost,
you know, I mean,
it is Bruno.
And I can warm to him because of the data, just purely looking at it in black and white. But you know, if you had it turned around and you said he was 11 or 12%, I would have liked it. And also, what's he at the moment? Is he around 10.4 or something like that? He's 10.6. It's a big chunk of change as well. And given what you've already outlined and the players that you've already proposed, I think I would rather make wholesale changes and upgrades across the board, as you know, instead of maybe just an over to Bruno and then maybe a Souček to Bartley is probably where I would go. I think I would prefer the more solid structural upgrade as opposed to maybe just that a couple of spots in midfield. But the ownership swung it anyway.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to the final midfielder here. And I think this is going to be an exciting one, an interesting one. And a lot of people maybe listening might want to look at this player a little bit closer. So this player is a talisman for this side, has the 5th best XA for the season with 55 minutes per chance created and 13 chances created in total. So a fairly good kind of player involved in the creative side of their team, but also they're on penalty duties. Most impressive, 3rd best XG among all midfielders this season and 2nd best XGI of all midfielders this season. The players obviously getting into the right positions as they've had 16 shots in the box and 5 goals so far this season. The team that they played for has the 3rd best run of fixtures over the next 6 game weeks. So, pretty kind of good fixtures to look forward to. But this season, their attackers mostly relied on this player and a few others, only scoring 12 goals. Plus, the team's total from XG is 8.22. Their non-penalty XG, 5th worst in the league. So what are you thinking about this player? Anand has guessed Zaha. Who's your guess on this player?
I think I just mentioned earlier in the pod, I think it would be 2 players in this midfield, 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑡 and Zaha. And look,
I'm too predictable. I should have gone even more.
What's Zaha's ownership levels? Because I mean, he's data and I love it, and he has been on my radar, and he's one player that I should have probably. I was very tempted to bring in game week 8. The game at Molineux was probably what that just put us off. Otherwise, it would have been him over Callum Wilson. So yeah, it's he is for me. Will he remain on penalties? That's a question that I've been fielding this week, because there's a little bit of I know we've seen, and I've absolutely butchered his name today on the other podcast, 𝐿𝑜𝑣𝑒𝑑. So
I think that's right. I think you've done well.
There's going to be an excerpt put out on social media. I did not say it like that this afternoon.
It's better than our attempt of 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑑's name.
But I like Zaha. I think we're seeing a player who, obviously, he's had issues about feeling he wants to play at a better level on the world's biggest stage domestically. He wants European football. I think there's almost an acceptance there. Well, look, I'll keep on producing and doing what I do, and the teams will come and spend the money and get me. There's no point in hankering or pushing for that move because I'm locked in with my contract. And sometimes the grass isn't always greener, and I think we've seen a more focused Wilfried Zaha this season. That was capped maybe but that performance at Old Trafford at the beginning of the campaign against his former employers, Palace going there and winning 3-1. Now they've picked up a couple of decent results, and I know Roy Hodgson gets a lot of flack. But the last result, I think was it Leeds in game week 8? Was it 4-1? And Eze looked as if he's come to the fore now. I mean, Zaha's got to be pleased with that, and you've got somebody on that left hand side who's going to be creating. I think there's a lot to like there with Wilfried Zaha as well. So he, dependent on budget, he could be one that does push maybe Tielemans out of that squad. But I know budget would be tight, and with the 4 that you've went with so far, I like those. So Zaha is there, and he's worth some serious consideration. But that would be a budget. That would come down to money, that one, I think, because I know he is slightly more expensive than what I've got in and around that area in a minute.
Yeah. Put that over money split between Ziyech and him, you're saving about 4 or 3 mil. You bump up Tielemans with like $1 mil, let's say, and that could do it. There is money in your squad there, especially with the big boy assets. Now, Anand, before we get into the big boy strikers that I'm going to be fielding to you, he said, Jason, my current mid is Bruno, Zaha, Grealish, and Sterling. I think, some really good solid picks there. And Sterling is obviously the noticeable one that a lot of people are worried about. I think, so you're saying KDB or Rashford. Now, KDB has the ability to punish anybody and everybody for not owning him. But in my personal opinion, I plumbed for Sterling because I think he's involved in a lot of attacks. And I think that moving between KDB and Sterling is almost like a sideways move. And you either want to do an improvement or stick, because for me, a sideways move is basically burning a transfer. And there's such a valuable commodity that I'd rather put it elsewhere. But, like I said, KDB is so brilliant and so integral to that City team. But I also have the feeling that if KDB does well, Sterling will do well, and vice versa. I think that, they work in tandem well together. And when Man City tick, I think all those kind of players do well together. But the interesting question there is you brought in Rashford to the table as well. And part of the thinking here is whether you feel that Man City transcend their fixtures, which I think somebody pointed out, quite rightly in the discussion here. But that's the historical Man City. And also, historically, Rashford has done well. And Man United have struggled a little bit in attack recently. But like I said, with the evaluation of Maguire, they look improved. So the evaluation there is Rashford obviously costs a little bit less. He'll be involved with the Manchester United attack for sure. And it's whether you believe these fixtures coming up for Manchester United and the team's ability to outdo Man City in terms of attacking ability over the, let's say, the next 6, which is normally the measure that I go with. Now, in terms of difficulty rating, Manchester United have the second best fixtures. And actually in game week 12, City and Man United play each other. And we saw last season that Ole, got 2 results over City, which was quite amazing. The first time in a long while. I can't remember which manager managed it before, but there's some great fixtures in there as well. West Brom, Sheffield United and Leeds for Rashford to play against. Whereas Manchester City have got probably 2 more difficult fixtures. So obviously they're playing Man United, but they've also got Tottenham in there. But then they've got home games against Burnley, Fulham and West Brom. And they're all captainable ones as well. was with Rashford against West Brom, Sheffield United and Leeds. You're obviously captaining him, Ben, but there might be other assets that you're looking at. You know, Tottenham, Harry Kane, you might think, oh, in one of those game weeks might be a better option. It's a hard one. So maybe I'm playing it too safe here, but I would stick with Sterling. But this is the sunk cost fallacy. So that's the psychology of sunk cost. I've stuck with Sterling this long. He's got a great run of fixtures coming up. Might as well keep him. And it's whether you want to risk getting Rashford and will you be able to kind of almost play it off in your head and be comfortable with it if then Sterling and Rashford both do well or Sterling does better. And for me, I'm happy to give Sterling the benefit of the doubt, especially those 3 home fixtures, which I will probably captain him for. Whereas Rashford, I don't know if I would captain him for those 3. And I'm happy to kind of put my things aside because, Ben, I'm sure you, as a Rashford owner, have more thoughts, and also you're not that keen on Sterling anyway. So maybe bring it with KDB, Sterling and Rashford. What would your choice be?
Certainly heading into game week 9, there are question marks over the fitness of Marcus Rashford. We know he's missed, he was withdrawn from the England squad due to the shoulder problem that he picked up in game week 8. What I would say with regards to that injury is he shouldn't be too far away. It's certainly nothing that's going to keep him out long term. I take positives from the fact that he did remain with the England squad, up until that first game. So, it wasn't a clear-cut decision. And again, different to maybe, lower extremity injury, it's not one that will stop Rashford from training. He can still keep these good levels of cardio, that base levels of fitness. It just may mean that he has slightly altered or non-contact training. But, you still be to participate in almost anything. So, if it was just a case, if it was impact, a little bit of heavy bruising and what have you, Marcus Rashford should and could be involved this weekend. But, the caveat is, there may be a slight problem there, and we never can be 100% sure with regards to that. And also, if he was to have another tumble and another fall on that shoulder, during training this week, then that potentially could rule him out. So if I'm looking to pull the trigger and make a decision on who to bring in, particularly after what we've seen in the number of players being flagged, then I'm going to want pretty much players who I'm guaranteed are fit and available and are going to be picked. Otherwise, it just feels like a bit of a waste, and I'm taking chances and I'm taking unnecessary risks.
Yeah, it's a great evaluation there. And I think my gut is to stick with Sterling just because good fixtures. I've had him for a while. And, if he does do well, that's kind of almost, we're talking about Mavericks differentials tonight. Sterling won't be kept by many in the community because they have those worries. I mean, he's 5.6% ownership. What about the fact that Sterling has had this calf injury? Is it an air quotes calf injury, or is there a real concern there with him as well? Because what people have called it is a typical England injury.
These quotes, these rumours about, international injuries and so on and so forth. And yes, to a certain extent, they seem to think that domestic club managers have some kind of influence on an international managers. But, rightly or wrong, all managers are working to their own agendas. Gareth Southgate doesn't really care about what happens domestically, to other managers, because if England obviously lost to Belgium and therefore failed to qualify for the Nations League, then he's getting the flak for that, and potentially it's his job at risk. So, is he just going to release a player for the sake of releasing it to keep somebody like Jose Mourinho or Oli or Pep happy? No, because, he's got mortgages to pay, he's got bills, he's got kids, he's got family, he wants holidays. So, you want to stay in a job. And if you want to give yourself the best opportunity and chance of winning these games, then you need to have the best players in place to be able to do that. However, he's also said that they will not take any unnecessary risks with players and put them out there where there are maybe question marks with regards to their fitness. And with a calf problem, we know that a minor tear, a little bit of tightness can quite easily be exacerbated and turn from something which is just, a mere strain. That means a few days on the sidelines to potentially, weeks or even months out. So will Sterling be available? I'd be fairly confident that he should be in and around that match day squad. But, international injury, these are competitive games England are playing. They're not all friendlies. The Republic of Ireland was a friendly. If it was all friendlies, then yes, we would probably see a completely different England squad and everybody would be released because slight knocks and niggles. But when we're talking about competitive games that England really need to win, then, there is something there and it does need to be monitored and managed accordingly.
So let's move it then into the final stretch, and this is for the forward line. Now, my recommendation here was actually, I like your forward line, 66% of it, if you will. Kane, no questions there. Werner, I think, is a strong hold. So possibly we're looking at a replacement for Wilson, who I know that you're in two minds with anyway. You kind of plumbed for him, which I don't, question at all, because looking at his individual data, pretty rocking stuff in terms of his XGI is the third best of all forwards this season. It's incredible stuff from him. He's looking good, 6 goals. And in terms of it, 15 shots inside the box, which isn't bad. But I do have 2 alternatives, which you might like from this kind of surface level data. And one of them is actually a bit of a saving on Wilson. So they start off at 5.9. And in terms of their individual data, that this player is playing in the side which had the best goal output over the last 4 matches with 11 goals. Fantastic stuff here. And, with these 11 goals, the team has last season had a top 6 XG rating. So they would have been one of the best attacks last season, top 6 in terms of it. Maybe not defensively there or thereabouts, but they looked good. And they've had 3 goals playing in this side over the last 4 game weeks. And looking at the data as well, so 14 shots in the side, the box. So this is all season though. 3.43 XG, which is top 10 in terms of forwards, and also very near Timo Werner, who is obviously on penalties. So you got kind of evaluate that. Timo Werner with 4 goals, this player with 3 goals. Obviously, it's a flurry of goals recently, but they're getting involved in the right areas. 14 shots in the box, only 3 less than somebody like Timo Werner, who is at elite level, and matching this XG as well, which is quite exciting. So in terms of that price point, number of goals, and what I would say is kind of looking at the fixtures, it's medial, that I would say they're about 10th. I haven't actually written down where they are, but the fixture run is mixed over the next 6. But this is a player that you could keep in your side for a little bit longer and maybe upgrade when you think the time is right. But there might be an improvement on Callum Wilson. So what do you think about this player? Have you got a guess as well?
I think it's back to Southampton, I think. And I think in its 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑒𝑚s would be in and around that price point. So that would be my guess at this striker you're talking about.
So you and Anand, I can confirm, are both correct. It is Mr. 𝐺𝑒𝑟𝑒𝑚s. Now, just talking about those fixtures before we get your opinion, it's Wolves up next, who we know have been kind of stalwarts at the back, and then Man United. But then they play Brighton, who have been leaking goals, Sheffield United and Arsenal, who I still don't think are great. And I think those are 3 quite good games for him. But this is a Southampton side, as said, 11 goals, in their last 4 games. They're in fierce form. And last season, they were a top 6 side in terms of XG. They're not missing Ings, which is the weird thing at the moment. They're doing really well without him. Looking at Che Adams, looking at that data, does that make you sway towards him over Callum Wilson, with the context of the fact that Newcastle at times are almost allergic to going forward because of their really deep defensive play?
For a long time. And I was actually gutted that Danny Ings picked up that injury. Che Adams almost is a placeholder for Danny Ings, who, again, I think that'll be the heart moment where he'll be returning straight to my side, once fully fit. What's not to like? There were concerns where would Che Adams produce the performances in this Saints lineup without Danny Ings doing a lot of the, he becomes the main focal point of that team now. I know he played up front with Theo Walcott against Newcastle, and that just added a different dynamic to the side. And it worked quite well. I mean, he took his goal supremely well. That was a great volley. I think it was from a Walcott assist, actually. And yes, what are we at in terms of ownership? Because I think Che Adams is probably attracting a lot of interest. Is it?
Only 4.4% ownership, which is really low, exciting. But also, what I would say as well is over the games where Ings was obviously fit. So Ings scored 6, 10, 7 in the last kind of 3 that they were together. But then Adams scored 5, 8, and 11. In those kind of final 3 games that they were together before Ings got injured, they were scoring almost neck and neck. Like, it wasn't, the spoils were only for one or the other. It was shared with that Southampton team. Then Newcastle, he got nice big 7 points there. Since game week 5, he's got some sort of involvement in the last 4 game weeks, 11, 8, 5, 7. He is in fine form as well. And 4.4% ownership instead of Callum Wilson, who I think is slightly higher because obviously he's been in good form as well, 14%. There's a 10% difference there. I can see your eyes almost lighting up with the fact that is a big
Can I tell you? I mean, this is breaking news. I mean, if you're still on the, if you're still following us live, thanks. It's been probably meandering through this, but I've done the wild card. I've just pulled the trigger. I know what I just thought there's no time like the present. I love these picks so much.
Live on air.
Live on air. I'm liking what you're saying. I want to just see if I can fit them in all in and around those price points. So going through, I've added Cancelo, Maguire.
I think you just need to face your mic.
Yeah, so
no problems there.
I was
excited.
I was getting excited with this team. I wanted to make sure that I was actually able to fit everybody in that I wanted to put in. So I've went with Cancelo, Maguire. My midfield is going to be Ziyech, Bartley, and Zaha. Tielemans, I'm a little bit, and but Callum Wilson gone. So if I can maybe leave a little bit of money in the bank for Danny Ings, maybe down the line, then I'm happy. But look, I'll wait for your final, because I know you have another attacker to bring to the table. But as you're talking away, I'll turn away from the mic and I'll listen, and I'll see how my team's progressing in terms of a budget. But I've gone with it, and I'm excited heading into game week 9.
I mean, this is the thing when you play your wild card as well. It's almost, I don't know, it's like a kid in a candy store. That's the game week that's almost the best, apart from maybe the start of the season and obviously your next wildcard or triple captain. You have so much positivity going into it. Now, my next choice, he's got a higher XG, higher shots in the box, higher goals this season than Che Adams. And also, I would say the attacks of these two teams are let's evaluate the actual attacks of these two teams. So in terms of it, I'm going to go all matches and then also compare them over the last 4 game weeks, because I think that also kind of contextualizes whether they've been hitting form, because they might have started the season slowly, as we've seen with some other sides. So kind of looking at this, the team here is slightly better, the one that we're looking at for in comparison to Southampton here. They've got 18 goals so far this season from expected goals of 11.8. They've got the 4th best shots in the box. They've got the 2nd best chances created. And in terms of big chances created, 2nd best as well. So, talking about it, this attack that we're looking at could be considered 2nd, 3rd best so far this season. And what I like about this individual players' data as well, as I said there, XGI is much more than Che Adams. Actually, it's 4.74 rather than 3.43. This player's XG themselves is 4.34. They're not on penalties. So this is all from out of, playing in the game situation. This is free play. This isn't from dead balls or any such involvement. 18 shots in the box, with 9 of those being on target. And what I said, there is 6 goals so far this season. So I think, this is a pretty solid player and one of the best attackers. Looking at their XGI, they are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th in terms of XGI for the season. And in terms of expected goals, I think they're about the same as well. And no, before people ask, it's not Patrick Bamford, because I wouldn't. That's a swear word in my even consider him. But yeah, what do you think about those initial numbers there from the team data as well as their individual data? A little bit better than Che Adams in terms of individual, but their team data, that is
lot to like.
Fascinating stuff.
Be concerned, given the fact that I've just looked at the team and brought in those players that we've talked about. Is budget now, and it sounds as if this player may come at a premium, or certainly at a price point where I'm maybe not able to shoehorn him in. So it's...
What if I told you that this player was only 0.2 more expensive than Che Adams as well?
Then I'm listening. Then I'm listening more. Then I'm liking. As it currently stands, I'm locked in with Tielemans because I can't upgrade to Zaha. I'm 0.1 short, as is always the case, which I'm not too disappointed with. I'm not too disheartened with that. And I mean, I was quite surprised with the Che Adams ownership of 4.4%. That makes him a more appealing option, given the fact that Southampton tick boxes. I've got Ward-Prowse, I've got Bertrand. Danny Ings is obviously he's got a place in my heart forever. As long as it's beaten, Danny Ings is there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Pure numbers, I like it.
This ownership of this player is also 7.7%, so there's still pretty much a differential as well. I mean, I feel like I should put you out of your misery and tell you who this player is. You want to guess? FPL Dave said you always like the numbers. Is this something?
I've got no price. What's that price at? Probably a little bit more than that, is he? Is Is he a midfielder? Is he listed as an attacker? Oh, God.
Uh,
It mustn't be him anyway. I was going to say 𝐺𝑟𝑒𝑑. Nah.
It is the big man himself, Ollie Watkins, somebody that I've whacked.
Well, you've already hoodwinked us into Ross Barkley into my team, and I cannot be doubling up with Villa. If I'm going to do any doubling up, it's got to be Jack, and I'm swerving Jack. So I'm just going to dismiss Ollie. I know what you're saying. The chance to jump on Ollie was maybe ahead of the Callum Wilson coin toss decision. And he returned, and I felt as if I missed out. And nah.
I've done myself dirty with Ollie Watkins as well. I took him out for the 2 kind of game weeks that he absolutely banged and got 20 points because I wanted Heung-min Son. So, maybe I'm vicariously living Watkins through you by telling you to get him in.
No, there's absolutely zero chance.
But what about FPL Dave?
I like numbers.
You said that you always like the numbers. Is that true, Ben?
They suit my narrative and they suit the way I'm thinking, that I love the numbers. If they don't, then you just massage the numbers or you just change your opinion. So look, I think it depends on when you ask that question. The further you get away from a game week, you lose that emotional context to, if you had to ask me on game week 8 what I would have based things on, it would have been like emotions. I was raw, I was raging. As we head into a game week, you sort of forget about what's happened before, so you're looking at the numbers then to help you out a little bit. We're taking in so much information, the numbers just help to clear a little way of a path and maybe streamline some of those decisions. So that's why I like the numbers, to be honest. And ultimately, if you play the odds over the course of a season, then you're going to be in a position to find the returning more often than not. But Anand's touching. Watkins plays Brighton next. They do, but regardless of league positions, I'm still not totally convinced about Villa. Yes, they've had a great start. And Brighton maybe aren't as bad, maybe, as their league position suggests. I still think it's a tough game. I think any teams coming in after this international break will struggle. It's been, they won't have had the opportunity on the training pitches to work on that technical aspect of the game. Players are returning from, far-flung corners of the earth. Goodness knows, how delays in terms of testing and quarantines and border control, so people are, putting hours on that travel. And again, it's this cumulative effect of load and minutes and fatigue. And I think it will play a part. And I think, we'll not see our best game week in terms of performances, individuals and teams, and outputs and goals and flashes of brilliance. Yes, there may be 1 or 2, but I think it's, it would come as no surprise, if it was this game week past us, without anything major really happening in terms of, entertainment.
I think as well with the point of and I think, I love Watkins. I'd really like to get him in my team, but maybe my front line isn't a big worry at the moment. I'd have to maybe take a hit to get him in. I think he'll do well against Brighton. I think he could be on the scoreboard. And there's a couple of fixtures in there as well, against Newcastle, Burnley, West Brom. Maybe not Newcastle as much, but there's a chance there to score goals in that period. But what I would say is, just basing it on game week 9, the fact that he's playing Brighton, I don't think is a good enough reason to bring him in on that alone. I think, with all these choices here, this is the reason why I'm talking about 6 game weeks ahead, is I want to be looking at long-term picks for you and for myself and my team, because it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so, I totally agree with you, Anand, that Watkins does play Brighton next. good chance for returns. And I think he's got a good chance for returns over the next 6 game weeks. But then looking at those teams as well, some of them are difficult games. You know, West Ham away, who, you know, we've said Cresswell and Masuaku look good because they're looking good defensively. Newcastle actually have the lowest big chances conceded over the last 4 game weeks, oddly enough, but the most chances conceded in that time as well, with 75. So it's a bit weird. Wolves, Burnley, I think have improved defensively, and I think definitely Burnley are ones to keep an eye on when their fixtures switch. So kind of looking at that, there's like a mix of, obviously they're good fixtures on paper, but then in reality there might be difficult ones because evaluating those teams a little bit as well. So there's a lot to kind of think about it. But I think this has been a really fun kind of experiment, Ben. And I think, you know, we'll put your team out and tell people, obviously on social media, but for everybody in the chat today, you've witnessed history, living history. That these are the players that obviously going to be template in, you know, 4 or 5 game weeks time, and today you have seen history made where Ben has made those all important decisions.
I've made the decisions with regards to who I've brought in, and I still got 4 players flagged heading into game week 9. So I've still got 4 players. I'm hopeful that at least 3 of those will recover though. So look, I'm happy with that team. And then barring any late team news towards the end of the week, that's locked in. The only difficulty that I have now is selecting which 11 players to go with, because, you know, I think that's pretty strong. I mean, if the league was to start now, without any question, I'd be up there number 1 in the world.
Of course, yeah. This is the winning team until Christmas, and then obviously after that there might be a different. But yours is going to be the template in the coming weeks.
I look forward to seeing how live FPL rate that in terms of a template percentage, because it was getting a little bit too high for my liking. People jumping on the Harry Kane and the Chilwell bandwagon. The Martinez. So hopefully this has kicked things right back down again. So I looked at.
I think what's happened is everybody's kind of copied your homework. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Is they've looked over your shoulder that Ben's doing well there, and at the moment this is what we could call. You know, this is very exclusive. This is almost like the conception of the template. This is the apple in your father's eye kind of template team moment. Yes, I like that. With the Premier Pundits, you got the template here, but I've you know said that all that I wanted to tonight, and I'm loving that you're loving this. I'm also loving that a lot of people in the comments are loving this, and kind of seeing some of the data, maybe differing ways to play FPL. And as always, we say get involved, you know, with social media. Let people know how much you've enjoyed this, and you can rewatch this. This is going out on your YouTube channel, Ben. So, you know, if your friends are interested in knowing the reasons why we've selected these, you can just play it back at any time at your leisure and get involved. But make sure to keep involved, because we will be going live a couple more times before the game week starts. We're going to be talking about all things FPL. So Wednesday, tomorrow, you're doing an injury update, and then Thursday, you and I will be back live again, giving what we say is the last minute kind of football news and all important information in terms of game week 9 and beyond, because, you know, some of this stuff will carry on in terms of it. But yeah, for me, I think it's a goodbye from me tonight,
Jason,
Ben, because
just a big thank you for the time and effort that you put into researching all of it. You know what is? I thoroughly enjoyed it. And hand on heart, there are players in there that I would never, ever have considered, ever. You know, the Ross Barkley decision, seeing him in my squad at the minute was almost unfathomable. In the Harry Maguire, you know, I think those are the 2 big surprises for myself. So again, thanks for that. A really interesting format. Great to see so many people in the chat. I've really enjoyed it. I mean, the 2 hours has flown by for me. It might have been for some of the others. but we get caught up in a moment, and thanks for that. Jason alluded to the fact that we are back with the Late Fitness Test podcast on Wednesday, which kicks off at 9 o'clock. We've seen Stel is going to be one of the co-hosts. He's in our chat box tonight following along. So it'll be myself, Stel, and Johnny Wilson. And we'll be doing a bit of a deep dive into injuries in and around the international break. Johnny brings a wealth of experience of elite level sports, and he almost lifts the curtain behind the scenes, and we'll be throwing in some more data in and around that. So, with regards to injuries and returns to play and what's really happening at clubs, that'll be a show not to be missed. And then back on Thursday, it'll be more of your live Q&A ahead of game week 9. We'll see, if there's been any late team news. That's throwing me Wildcard out at kilter. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And like I say, it's going to be a pretty manic few weeks between now and heading into the new year. No more international breaks, so we can focus solely on domestic football. But for tonight and for now, that's it. Thanks again, guys. It's a bye from me.